Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. I think it's interesting that we're talking about 16 years time frame that the SEC was in the process of examining or had an opportunity to examine Bernie Madoff. And I think one of the most troubling hearings that we had here was the hearing where we heard from Mr. Markopoulos about the Madoff case. And prior to that, I had an opportunity to talk to some of the investigators for the SEC about that particular case, because it was absolutely astounding what Mr. Markopoulos was telling us. What he laid out was the world's biggest Ponzi scheme, and how over a period of years he repeatedly attempted to reach the SEC and actually found an individual at the Boston branch, Mr. Ed Mannion, who was not like, as he described, the over-lawyered SEC, the over-lawyered SEC that for years after years had failed in this endeavor. He finally found a guy who had experience as a portfolio manager, who actually knew what he was doing, who had experience as a trader. And when he looked at this data, he instantly saw the same thing, the same reality that Mr. Markopoulos saw. But Mr. Mannion was silenced internally in the organization. Why? He wasn't a lawyer. He was not part of the over-lawyered offices in New York and Washington, and they saw to it that that went nowhere. Now, on several occasions, Mr. Markopoulos attempted on his own then to go in and to explain to SEC officials in detail why Mr. Madoff's returns were simply not possible given the investment strategy. And he noted, and this was the astounding aspect that I explained, the SEC investigators explained this to us, they affirmed this, there was just a lack of understanding within the SEC of the more intricate aspects of our financial markets, which they just didn't understand. So what Mr. Markopoulos describes as a combination of a lack of market experience and knowledge by the over-lawyered SEC, combined with an investigative ineptitude, which we're well aware of, that aspect has got to be addressed. And to have somebody examined 8 times by the SEC and other institutions in 16 years and have this not found when people were calling attention to it shows a structural flaw. And I think, rather than a lack of resources, this structural flaw is at heart of this problem. Why? Because it didn't just happen here. We also had this problem in Britain, as described to us by some of the British investigators, where they were over-lawyered as well. What is the proposed solution? Well, many have offered the idea of having retired people with market experience brought in so that you just don't have, in the words of Mr. Markopoulos, 20-something-year-old lawyers, so that you have people with real-life experience who can spot a Ponzi scheme in a New York minute in a position of responsibility where they can't be shut down by 20-year-old lawyers. And so I offer that up simply because he was quite insistent on that structural change in the organization, and we're appreciative of anything you can do to reset those priorities so that you actually have people retired with the kind of experience where they understand the market and understand these schemes. Thank you very much, Chairwoman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Royce.